Further comments?
Something new with Common Core. Accountability itself came to be a major concept with No Child Left Behind, which was, as Peg was trying to explain earlier, a reauthorization of ESEA, which began in 1965 as part of the War on Poverty by President Lyndon Johnson at the time. With No Child Left Behind, accountability as a concept became very powerful. All of us want our public officials or public servants to be accountable. Under No Child Left Behind, it meant that schools and school districts would be accountable for children's scores on the tests that were required under NCLB. What the Obama administration or Secretary of Education Duncan did was push the envelope a little bit more and say it won't be just schools and school districts, it will be teachers who will be accountable. That's a huge push, but it was not ever analyzed or commented upon by anyone because it is, of course, totally unfair to teachers, and it changes the dynamics of a classroom, which needed to be examined. So let's at least understand that we have flawed standards in both ELA and math, and the only person held accountable is the teacher for teaching them. Now, imagine this as a situation in most classrooms. You've got poor standards to begin with, but you're going to be damned no matter what you do. You're held accountable for kids' results on the tests that are based on these standards. And in English language arts, most of them are skills. They are empty skill sets, which means that somewhere a curriculum has to be found, actual texts that the teacher teaches. That is where Common Core-based consultants come from. In Fayetteville, Arkansas, she was paid $200,000 a year to tell the English teachers what texts they might teach, so that then those empty skill sets could be assessed on a Common Core-based test. There are other problems, and I won't go into the details because they're all on that page that's titled Flaws. But you do have to read through them. This is an analysis I've been making for 6 years. They are unclear standards, and I give an example, and they are not fewer, clearer, and deeper as the claim has been. And I give you examples from both California and Massachusetts, which had better standards to begin with. One of the questions that was raised earlier, I'll answer it very briefly, how come Massachusetts gave up its first-class standards? Well, $250 million is a nice carrot. That was what we were promised under Race to the Top, and Governor Patrick was a friend of President Obama, and it was very clear to the rest of the Board of Education that we were going to get that $250 million if we abandoned our standards. We did. And we got the $250 million. It was used up by last year. That was the last year of Race to the Top money. There isn't any more. And instead we have waivers, which are even more of a constraint upon schools because, as you've heard, they require schools to adopt either Common Core standards directly or a set from their own higher ed people who've approved them that will guarantee proficiency for everyone in the whole state, something we've never achieved and no other country in the world has ever achieved. Let me move from these empty skills in ELA. The math you're going to have to struggle through yourself. I'm not a mathematician. I have the long version, you have the short version in front of you.
We'll do math in a minute, so we'll finish.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about math afterwards. But let me get to the close reading issue and literacy. Close reading I have myself criticized because David Coleman, the chief architect for Common Core's English Language Arts Standards, studied at Yale, and he should have known what close reading was. It was a technique for reading poetry. It was developed by two people who were eventually on the Yale English faculty, Cleanth Brooks, Robert Penn Warren, you may recognize the last name, and they developed close reading as a way to look at poetry, decontextualized. Well, it was not a technique for looking at informational text. That's where he moved it without any justification. And he's moved it there even with his so-called literacy standards. That was his idea too. He's admitted that in some workshop that is available for YouTube to show that this is indeed his idea. Because as history teachers have pointed out, one of the major skills you want students to learn when they look at a primary source document, they need to start with contextualization and sourcing. In other words, what was the historical context for the Gettysburg Address? Who said it, when, where, why? And was it actually what President Lincoln wrote? Those are the primary skills a historian wants students to understand. And those are not what David Coleman wants students to come to the Gettysburg Address asking. He wants decontextualized cold reading. So we have some really bizarre pedagogical practices being spread around the curriculum by these misbegotten English language arts standards. I will say a few words now, I guess, if I have
We're going to
time.
do math second. So
Math is
just let that-
second.
Yeah, he's going to do math as a whole second topic. So just.
Oh, I thought it was both sets of standard. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're going, first we're getting all the English
We'll go
comments,
back to
then
math.
we're going to go back to the math.
Oh, you're going to come back to
Right.
math. Okay.
I-
Then let me ask you to look at the specific difference. in
30 seconds?
I'm sorry.
30 more seconds?
Look at section 3. And please look at the example of a true content standard from California and from Massachusetts. And then in the first paragraph, look at the empty skill standard from Common Core to understand what kind of a difference teachers are facing that they will be held accountable for.